In 1959, DC introduced the world to Supergirl, aka Kara Zor-El. She's one of the world's most well-known female superheroes. She was the first female comic book hero to receive a theatrical film adaptation, and has also been adapted in animation and television. She also happens to be my favorite superhero. This series is going to look at every year in the ongoing existence of Kara Zor-El. I'm going to cover all of her stories from the Silver Age to now. Cameos or minor roles may be mentioned, but also may be skipped over. Kara is a character that will very often technically be in books, but just so that there's a large amount of superheroes. She rarely gets to actually do anything in these books. And yes, this will also cover adaptations of Kara. Now you might notice my frequent use of Kara. That is who this series of videos is focused on. Not Matrix, not Peter David's Linda Danvers. I have nothing against alternate versions of Supergirl, and I know David's run is quite well liked. This stuff will be mentioned and brought up, but I will not be deep diving. Kara is the character I'm invested in and wish to explore. Now before we get into 1959 and Kara's premiere, we do have to do a little bit of background. I imagine most of you know Superman. Created in 1938, he is ostensibly the first superhero debuting in Action Comics #1. I don't think it can be summed up how popular Superman was during the first couple decades of his existence. He kinda took the nation by storm. DC was always expanding and pushing Superman. There was a Superboy book that showcased the Man of Steel's adventures as a teenager. Supporting characters Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen got solo books as well, all of which were major sellers for the company. The idea of a female counterpart to Superman was floated around for a while. They had Lois Lane become Superwoman and a Supergirl appear in Superboy #5. In 1958, DC did a bit of a market test in Superman #123. This issue saw Jimmy Olsen use a magic totem to wish a female counterpart for Superman into existence. This being Super-Girl. Superman finds her mostly to be a nuisance, and the story ends with her sacrificing herself to save him. Casually Comics did a very funny video on it. The issue must have done well because the following year, DC debuted the real Supergirl in Action Comics #252. Quick aside, comics have cover dates and then publication dates, and they are different. A comic book may say January 2023, for example, but was actually published in November 2022. The difference is usually 2 months. I believe this happens with magazines as well, and is to make issues feel newer, even if they've been out on the stands for a minute. Point of all that being, I'm going to go by a rough estimate of the publication date, or the exact one, not the cover date. Action Comics #252 has a cover date of May 1959, but publication date was March 31st, 1959. The previous issue teased the upcoming arrival of the Girl of Steel. Supergirl is featured on the cover of Action Comics #252 by Curt Swan and Stan Kaye. The cover gives the world their first look at Supergirl in her fairly standard costume. The very first story, The Supergirl from Krypton, was written by Otto Binder with art by Al Plastino. They are the creators of Supergirl. Plastino doesn't quite remember who came up with the design for Kara. Supergirl Comic Box Commentary, a Supergirl dedicated blog that has been active since 2007, found an interview with Plastino in the Legion Companion. Plastino said, "Well, they wanted her to look like Superman, so you put a skirt on her, put the red boots on her, and the red cape. The only discussion was, should she be blonde? And I thought that was a good idea." Binder was a science fiction author who moved into comics to make a better living than he was. Within a year or two at Fawcett Comics, he was writing their #1 title and Superman's main competition at the time, Captain Marvel. Binder was one of the most, if not the most, significant writers on Captain Marvel, including the creation of Mary Marvel, who was so successful she got her own book. For reference, Supergirl did not get a solo title until the early 70s, despite her own popularity. Binder stayed with Fawcett until it closed in 1953, but had begun writing at DC a few years prior. He is a major force in the Silver Age Superman, as was Plastino. Binder was involved in creating not only Supergirl, but also the Legion of Superheroes and the villain Brainiac. If you don't know what I mean by Silver Age, it is the name of this era. The Golden Age starts with the creation of Superman in 1938. The Silver Age starts in the mid-50s with the creation of Barry Allen, the second Flash, and the subsequent reinvention of the DC line. While I think people sometimes debate when the ages begin and end, I consider the end of the Silver Age to be the death of Gwen Stacy in the early 70s. Anyway, story time. The Supergirl from Krypton. Clark Kent is minding his own business at the Daily Planet when he notices a rocket about to crash out of town. He arrives to discover a young girl, obviously invulnerable and wearing a supersuit. She tells him her story. When Krypton exploded, Argo City was flung out into space but remained intact. Conveniently, a large bubble of air came with it, and the citizens had a food machine so they could live indefinitely. However, the ground irradiated into kryptonite. Scientist Zor-El instructed everyone to line the ground with lead, which protected them from the radiation. Years passed, Zor-El married a woman named Allura, and they had a daughter, Kara. When Kara was 15, a meteor shower hit Argo City, unleashing the kryptonite and dooming the city. Zor-El quickly built a rocket to save Kara, while Allura tried to find a safe destination. She discovered Earth and broadcast about Superman. They learned he was also from Krypton, so Allura decided to send Kara there, and made her a matching suit so that Superman would recognize her as Kryptonian. Kara's story ends with her blasting off, a self-described orphan of space. After she finishes her story, the two discover that they are cousins. Zor-El was the brother of Superman's father, Jor-El. She asks if she'll be able to live with Superman, considering their family and all they have left, and she just went through the worst possible tragedy and is now on an alien world with power she doesn't understand or know how to control. Superman immediately shoots down this idea because he is an awful person. He instead decides that Kara will stay in Midvale Orphanage under a secret identity. He buys her clothes and a brown wig, and she comes up with the name Linda Lee. And that's pretty much the story. Supergirl arrives, tells us her tragic backstory, and Superman throws her in an orphanage, which will be her main status quo for a bit. Our next story the following month is The Secret of the Super Orphan in Action Comics number 253, written by Otto Binder with art by Jim Mooney. Parents have come to the orphanage. A couple is interested in Linda, but she's rude to them, so they'll leave her alone. Superman has forbidden her from revealing herself, and she cannot be adopted. Crazy thought. Maybe it was really stupid to throw her in an orphanage, Clark. There's a boy, Timmy, who's very upset because he has no talents to showcase at the talent show the orphanage is doing to impress the parents. However, Timmy has farming experience, and there is a farming couple interested in him, but they are too poor to adopt Timmy. Linda decides to help as Supergirl, throwing a boulder into the ground on the farmer's property so hard that it travels across the earth and comes out in Italy near a famous landmark. The farmer sees the hole and sets up a telescope, charging people to see the landmark through his hole in the ground. He makes a killing, but no longer wants to adopt Timmy as he sells his farm and plans to move to a home in Midvale. Linda decides to help Timmy some more. She convinces him to put on a magic show at the talent show, serving as his assistant. She uses her powers to help him put on a show, and the farmer couple adopt him. In May, Supergirl makes a brief appearance in Superman number 130. The story is The Curse of the Kryptonite, written by Otto Binder with art by Al Plastino. The creators back together. Superman is exposed to a kryptonite meteor that's slowly killing him. He tries calling out to Linda, but his voice is too weak and she's busy fixing a bridge. Also in May comes Supergirl's foster parents in Action Comics number 254, written by Otto Binder with art by Jim Mooney. Linda is adopted by a couple, the Dales, who are circus performers. She's hesitant, but starts to feel hopeful. They include her in their act where she pretends to have super strength. However, she discovers they're swindlers. They tell people Linda has super strength because she drank a power tonic that they sell. The power tonic is just sugary water with ginger. Linda decides she needs to teach them a lesson. She uses her actual super strength in front of them and makes them believe it's because of the tonic. Convinced the tonic is real, the dad spends all his money to get the formula, only for it to obviously be bogus. Linda returns the money to the people the Dales hustled and goes back to the orphanage as the Dales are now broke. In June, we get Supergirl Visits the 21st Century, written by Otto Binder, with art by Jim Mooney in Action Comics number 255. Linda receives a letter from Superman telling her to test out her time travel abilities, a thing they could just do in the Silver Age. So Supergirl travels to the 21st century where she finds a space orphanage. She almost immediately comes across Kryptonite and dies, but is saved by a young boy named Tommy who doesn't see her. He just turns the Kryptonite into ice for fun. Supergirl tries to repay Tommy by saving his life, but he's able to save himself out of every predicament. A couple come to adopt Tommy, but they get trapped in a flock of crystalline mirror meteors, which are honestly really cool. Supergirl saves them, and they're able to adopt Tommy, so Supergirl considers them even. She travels back to the present with the final panel informing us that little Tommy will grow up to be Tommy tomorrow, appearing in World's Finest Comics. Next up is The Great Supergirl Mirage, written by Otto Binder with art by Jim Mooney and Action Comics number 256. This story features the debut of Dick Wilson, who will be a significant love interest for Linda. He's in the orphanage and manages to get a photograph of Supergirl, proving she exists. Dick is convinced Linda must be Supergirl and tries to prove it, but she's able to thwart it. However, he still has that picture. Superman solves this by sending a Supergirl robot to the orphanage who performs a stunt and reveals she's a robot, clearing Linda and making it clear there is no real Supergirl. What's funny about Dick is how unsubtle the issue is about what he is supposed to be. The story, multiple times, states he is Linda's Lana Lang. That is the role he's filling. It's just weird to call it out like that. In August, Supergirl appears in Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen number 40 in the story Jimmy Olsen, Supergirl's Pal, written by Otto Binder, with pencils by Kurt Swan and inks by John Forte. Swan is my favorite Supergirl artist so far. I really like how he draws her. In this story, Jimmy is investigating a hustler sideshow dude, guess Bender really liked that plot idea, and fearing for his life, tries to set up a trap. He ends up blinding himself with tear gas because Jimmy is an idiot. The criminal pretends to be a cab driver to get Jimmy in his car, and then throws him off a bridge. Superman is busy and doesn't hear Jimmy's signal watch. However, Supergirl does, and swoops in to save him. He doesn't believe she's Supergirl, and she spends much of the story trying to convince him that she's really a Supergirl, and not a trick, but to no avail. Superman eventually shows back up and helps Jimmy stop the crook as Linda goes back to the orphanage. Also that month was Action Comics number 257, which featured the 3 Magic Wishes written by Otto Binder, with art by Jim Mooney. Linda is trying to read fairy tales to the younger kids at the orphanage. A young boy, Tom, keeps spoiling the readings and telling the kids that fairy tales aren't real. Using her powers, Supergirl pretends to be a fairy godmother to teach him a lesson. In September, we move on to Action Comics number 258, which features an absolutely hilarious cover by Kurt Swan and Stan Kaye, with Superman yeeting Supergirl off Earth. This story is Supergirl's farewell to Earth, written by Otto Binder, with art by Jim Mooney. Supergirl happens to see Krypto the Superdog and decides to introduce herself. She's forbidden to reveal herself, but figures it doesn't matter since it's Krypto. She also reveals that she doesn't know Superman's secret identity, which is crazy to me. She plays with Krypto, but Superman shows up and declares that she broke his rule. He exiles her on an asteroid for 1 year as punishment. Supergirl spends about a week there before Krypto shows up with a note from Superman, telling her to return to the orphanage for 1 day to avoid nearby kryptonite. She returns, but has to think quick on her feet to explain why Linda Lee has been missing for a week. She convinces everyone she was lost in Dismal Swamp. But one reporter doesn't quite buy it and keeps pushing after everyone else has left. Supergirl tries to use her powers, but when they don't work on him, she realizes this reporter, Clark Kent, is really Superman. The whole thing was a test to see if Linda could keep her secret identity. If she passed, Superman would reveal his secret identity to her. She indeed passes and figured out his identity on her own. Moving on to October, we've got The Cave Girl of Steel and Action Comics number 259, written by Otto Binder, with art by Jim Mooney. Linda feels restless and bored, trapped in an orphanage, a feeling I imagine is shared by the writer, so she decides to time travel to the prehistoric era. She discovers some cave people as well as dinosaurs. She has some fun, saves a baby, rides a brontosaurus, fights a sea serpent, and teaches the cave people about fire. When she returns to the present, she sees a stone tablet made by the cave people depicting her fighting the sea serpent. November is a busy month for Kara, starting in Superman number 134. This issue is a 3-part story called The Super Outlaw from Krypton, written by Otto Binder, with pencils by Wen Boring and inks by Stan Kaye. Supergirl is only in part 3. The story is a citizen of the Bottle City of Kandor wants revenge on Superman and ultimately traps Superman there, miniaturized. This outlaw, Call X, then impersonates Superman and wreaks havoc. Supergirl hears about this on the radio and flies off to confront him. The two awkwardly tell each other their respective backstories, and then Supergirl flies off to save Clark. She gets him out of the bottle, but he's still tiny, but he has a plan. Once Call X returns to the Fortress of Solitude, Superman has Supergirl and Krypto pick up the fortress and fly it into space. Superman says something about light rays left by Krypton that allows Call X to see what really happened with his father. Call X has a change of heart and regrows Superman and clears his name. Next is Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane, number 14. Story is Lois Lane's secret romance, written by Otto Binder, with art by Kurt Schaffenberger. Lois is distraught after Superman poses for a picture with some pretty contest winners. She calls them hussies. Linda observes this and decides to help Lois because if Superman and Lois get married, they can adopt Linda and be her parents. Supergirl subliminally puts Lois on Clark's mind by painting Lois's face on every billboard he passes, but then erasing it when he takes a second look. Clark just believes Lois is on his mind a lot, which must mean he's in love with her. He asks her out on a date as Superman. The two have candlelit dinner on a boat with Supergirl sneakily helping. She tries to use her super breath to push Lois into Superman's arms, but accidentally blows her overboard. Superman saves her, but is distraught. He says he was just about to propose, but he can't marry Lois because he'll have to save her all the time, which is so different than their current relationship. He goes to Lois's apartment to apologize, but she's receiving love letters and gifts, supposedly from Batman. Supergirl has forged these letters and sent the gifts herself, intending to make Superman jealous. The last gift is a Batwoman costume with a note asking Lois to be his Bat Queen. Superman says Batman is his pal, and he won't stand in the way. Supergirl then tries hypnosis, telling Superman to propose tomorrow. Superman proceeds to propose to every woman in town, pissing Lois right off. Superman then reveals to Supergirl that he caught on when he noticed the Batwoman costume had an insignia on the cape it shouldn't have. And then he looked closer at the note and saw Supergirl's fingerprints. The hypnosis also didn't work, he just played along to teach her a lesson. Supergirl promises to never interfere with his love life again. Next we have two stories in Action Comics number 260. The first is Mighty Maid, written by Otto Binder with art by Al Plastino. A mysterious new hero arrives named Mighty Maid, who basically throws herself at Superman. They have a quick and intense romance, much to Lois's dismay. Superman proposes with Lois present, who he insisted be present for said proposal. Superman and Mighty Maid then leave to live in her home dimension, but they actually just go to an underwater cave. Once there, Mighty Maid takes off her disguise, revealing Supergirl. She was Mighty Maid the whole time. They kissed. Multiple times. Superman would rather make out with his 15-year-old cousin than date Lois Lane. This whole charade happened because aliens have been spying on Superman, planning to destroy Earth. He feels they are justified in their reasoning, so he doesn't want to just beat them up. So the only possible solution was to have his 15-year-old cousin wear a disguise, make out a bunch, get engaged, and pretend to leave Earth. Once they believe Superman is gone, the aliens leave. Problem solved. Supergirl asks if she can be public now and not a secret trapped in an orphanage. Superman says no, because he is the worst. Also in Action Comics number 260 is the Girl Superbaby, written by Otto Binder, with art by Jim Mooney. Supergirl rescues an old man from drowning, but the water turns out to be a fountain of youth. Supergirl quickly transforms into a baby and chases a butterfly into the trunk of a pair of criminals' car who just stole some jewels. They're hiding in the Badlands where Native Americans used to live, and is supposedly haunted by Native American spirits. The Girl Superbaby gets into a bunch of hijinks, including a flying scarecrow and eating all their food, making the crooks think there is a spirit haunting them. After setting a fire, Girl Superbaby chases the rings of smoke, accidentally forming an SOS message, which the cops see, and they arrive to arrest the criminals. Our final story in December 1959 is Supergirl Super Pet in Action Comics number 261, written by Jerry Siegel, with art by Jim Mooney. Siegel is, of course, the co-creator of Superman, and this is the first Supergirl story not written by Otto Binder. Linda finds a small piece of kryptonite and decides to experiment on it to see if she can find a way to make it not harmful to her and Superman. She's unsuccessful and throws it out. Later, she finds a cat being attacked by a dog and saves him. The cat follows her back to the orphanage, and Supergirl is allowed to keep him, naming the cat Streaky. Streaky is playing in the yard and comes across the kryptonite. Due to Linda's experiments, the X-Kryptonite, as it's called, gives him superpowers. He flies around town helping out other cats and fighting dogs and eagles. Linda hears his meow and goes out as Supergirl to find her new cat with superpowers. They play for a bit until Streaky loses his powers, becoming a normal cat once more. An eventful year for the Girl of Steel. We get her origin, she gets her own Lana Lang in the form of Dick Wilson, her own super pet, time travels to both the future and past, makes out with her cousin. I think it's pretty clear how quickly Otto Binder was kinda over the orphanage stuff. They set up this status quo where the stories are going to be orphanage hijinks, and they do a couple of those, but quickly kinda abandon it. The orphanage stuff is probably my least favorite of these, in that they are the least interesting. Mighty Maid is certainly the weirdest story, but it is also memorable and kinda insane. Not good though. I think my favorite story is Lois Lane's Secret Romance. It's just so bonkers and weird. I like the energy of it. Another observation is that Binder does really seem comfortable with the sci-fi material. That's where I feel he's having the most fun with Supergirl. I'd like to thank the Supergirl comic box commentary for that Al Plastino quote, as well as maidofmight.net, which has all of Supergirl's appearances nicely laid out. That website is a very helpful resource to any Supergirl fan. Let me know what you think. Have you read these classic Supergirl stories? Do you have a favorite? Let me know in the comments, and be sure to like and subscribe.